Yep, alright. And we're live, I'm pretty sure. Come one, come all. Welcome to New World Supernova here. I'm Jay. Today I have with me Daniel. Say hi.
Hello.
Hello, hello. And, yeah, another damn good chapter this week, eh?
Yeah, really nice. I liked it.
It's a bit weird because it was one of those chapters that was, like, really, really fast, but, like, had a lot of potential substance in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
I
Mm.
I have to take a massive L on this one. Just straight up, kid doesn't have Rio.
Yeah, yeah. I want to
Which,
talk about that.
yeah. So, I guess that's just
I'm
like the
pretty sure I
jumping
was
in
saying he
point.
didn't have it.
Yeah. Um.
Yeah. So one really interesting thing with there is seemingly, um, the only person who can like with relative ease even hurt Kaido is Luffy,
Yeah.
right? Kid can't hurt him with that much ease. It might have done a little bit of damage with the crush, but like how often are you going to have opportunities to crush over and over again to eventually beat someone? Zoro and Killer tried to cut him and didn't work. Zoro
Well,
seemingly implied that he can eventually start hurting him, but he has to use a lot of Enma's power, which would mean that he can't hold back and have a long endurance against Kaido. So if he hurts him, he's got to put like his all into a slash, which which doesn't look very good for his endurance. Um, and I'm assuming like the amount of damage that he would do isn't enough to like two shot Kaido. So like seemingly, if it was a one-on-one versus Zoro and Kaido, he would like Zoro would just run out of energy, just constantly doing slashes that slightly hurt Kaido until he just can't do them anymore. So yeah, it seems like Luffy is the only one out of the five who are even somewhat of a match.
so
Um,
I
Zoro's saying, I can hurt you, but we all knew that.
I'll go through. We'll go through from the beginning of the chapter and just sort of walk our way through it. But just jumping sort of to like 2/3 of the way through it, when Zoro and Killer both attack Kaido, right? I'd like to point
Yeah.
out I saw no damage from where Zoro cut, but if you actually take a look at the panel just before Kaido laughs it off, his neck's crushed in where Killer tried to decapitate him.
Yeah, it looks like there's a bit of a like a black mark. Like it's like a imagine like you wrap like a wire around someone's neck and like you pull
Mm.
on it, but it doesn't actually cut in.
Yeah, so
Yeah, there's like a mark there.
very interesting. What I will say is at this point in time, my stance is going to be one of two things. One, Luffy's the only one with Rio here, and seemingly with the way that Zoro and Killer did their thing, Swordsman Rio definitely seems like the lesser out of like so like you have normal armament hardening. Then the next step, if you're a swordsman, is to imbue your sword. So that'd be like a stage one of Rio. Stage two of Rio would be to like imbue it out into the air, not through a weapon. Stage two does seem different, seeing as how Zoro specifically states that's what he learned from the old man in Wano, huh? And Kid's very shocked, going like,
Mhm.
"That's a different type of haki than what he would be known to use." And even later in the
Yeah,
chapter, it's implied that Kaido's only gone up against 5 people that have it, which is a whole nother conversation in its own right. Like
yeah.
a lot of implications here. Um, it's yeah.
Kaido literally put him on the world stage of all of the strongest Haki masters that have ever existed, at least within Kaido's lifetime.
Well,
Like
I mean, can you even say
he's
that?
literally got
Because
yeah.
like, if I'm being completely honest here,
Shanks
this is
wasn't there.
this is no Shanks was there,
Was he?
but
Okay, right.
this is making Kaido look bad because there's no Mihawk, there's no admirals, there's no current top tiers. There's Shanks is the only top tier currently that was on that list. Everyone else is dead or Luffy.
Why does that make Kaido look bad? Wouldn't that imply that Mihawk can't be on his level?
Would it?
Shanks is.
Since you'd assume that as the world's best swordsman, he would be a better swordsman than Shanks, and if Shanks is damaging Kaido, it would most likely be for it. We'll come to that. We'll come to that conversation
Yeah,
because
we
then
don't necessarily know about
because
swordsmanship,
we
right?
know all three of the admirals pre time skip have Rio because we've seen them use it and we've seen it commented on that they've used it, right? So the fact
Yeah.
that Kaido didn't drop them in that same tier is implying that Kaido hasn't fought an admiral, seemingly. So this comes back to like the validity of what the Yonko have done for the last 20 years, like we've talked about, where they're sort of just they're strong, but they've all sort of stayed in their area and haven't really
Right.
fought
So you're saying
other
that
top tiers.
those are just the strong people that Kaido's actually fought before,
Yeah, potentially.
and like that it means that he hasn't fought any admirals, or he hasn't fought, or at least anyone that he has fought that are on that level haven't been able to hurt him. So like
Yeah,
if he had fought an admiral, they hadn't been able to hurt him. Because maybe, for example, the defensive, or the kind of like Buddha palm type of Ryu that we saw from the
the
pacifist dude,
admirals and that, and Sentomaru. Yep.
and the admirals, yeah. Maybe that is like pure defense. Like if you know that, doesn't necessarily mean that you know the offensive version that Luffy has. Like maybe you have to learn them separately, and so maybe maybe even the admirals that he's fought, if he's fought one or two of them, didn't have it,
Well,
at least when he fought them.
I mean, here's the interesting
The thing
thing.
is though, like I think that ability that Luffy has gained now is something that is seemingly similar to Future Sight, and Rayleigh himself has even said, "Oh, like there are a few people in the world who have this power, who have Future Sight."
Yeah.
So like it may very well be that the thing that Luffy's just gained offensively is also something that like only a few people really have it. Like a lot of people just get like Katakuri level armament haki, and then like standard like good like good perception haki, and then just get a really broken fruit,
I
or just
mean,
have physically strong bodies.
the thing about it is, if you're looking at these people, all the people that Kaido's pretty much implying have learnt them are connected to each other. You have Roger, who taught it to Shanks, essentially. You have Rox, who taught it to Whitebeard, essentially. You had Odin, who would have learnt it partially on his own in his swordsman skill, and then developed it with Whitebeard and Roger. You know what I mean? Like the five people that we saw there are all very interconnected, and you could almost say, like, if Roger and Rox developed, Rio there, right?
Yeah.
Then, you know, they're prodigies beneath them. Like, I stand on the idea that possibly Whitebeard was Rox's first mate because he was the strongest combatant back then. You know what I mean? And if you look at Shanks, Shanks is like the prodigy, the apprentice prodigy of Roger's crew. You know what I mean? So it
Yeah.
would be fitting that, it's sort of like the inherited will there almost like from their skill sets. But do you know what's crazy interesting about that?
Mhm.
You've got Roger, you've got Whitebeard, you've got Rox. Where's Garp? If Kaido was involved in the Battle of God Valley,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Why is Garp not there? Did that mean Garp didn't land a single hit on Kaido, but throughout the course of that fight, Roger attacked Kaido, and having been a member of Rox's crew, Rox and Whitebeard, have fought him in the past, just like the whole Sanji Zoro sort of shit.
True. I mean, it could be just that. I'm not sure. Like, the thing is, I don't think Garp would have fought Kaido directly. I think Kaido was too young and like low tier at that point to fight Garp. I think it would have been like Garp and Roger versus the captain. But
Yep.
then again, I don't think he would have fought Roger either. But he would have seen Roger fighting probably his captain at one point, right?
I mean,
he would have seen his captain using those abilities and Roger using those abilities. So then I guess why wouldn't he see Garp using it?
I mean, when Whitebeard fought Roger, we had Odin at the time come charging in and try to take a shot at Roger, and Roger just one-shot him and bat him away before moving on to Whitebeard. How do we know that, Kaido doesn't go, oh, step back, Captain, I'll take out this low-level pirate, and then, Roger just swats him away like a fly as well.
Yeah, true.
It's interesting because now, right, you've got... You can look at this in like sort of three ways. Number one is this is just like Kaido's personal losses, which makes sense in the sense that if you look at him, he's as a pirate he's lost 18 times, right? And they say it was by other various pirates, Yonko, and the world government, right? You look at those people there, and say all of those are his pirate experiences of having lost in combat, right? And you could argue then that in the case of the Marines, he never lost in a one-on-one. He just lost in, overwhelming numbers. Whereas these people here are the people that have been able to defeat him, sort of overwhelming him in single combat.
Yeah.
Like
It
that.
seems it seems as well that like I know it wouldn't be super thematically accurate if he had Big Mum among those people, but it does kind of imply that Big Mum also doesn't have the means to stand toe to toe against him, right? But then at the same time, that would imply that Shanks does, to like a higher degree than Big Mum, which would actually put Shanks above Big Mom at least, maybe even Kaido. You know what I mean? Because maybe he was just saying these are people who are actually strong enough to fight me, not necessarily beat me.
Mm-hmm.
And then Shanks is one of them. But even then, he didn't include Big Mom. So which means he doesn't even consider Big Mom being able to beat him whatsoever. Whereas like Shanks is like he's probably gonna win, but like I mean he'll probably beat Shanks, but Shanks actually could beat him. You know what I
Well,
mean?
I mean,
Could imply that it goes like Kaido, Shanks, Big Mom in
I'm,
terms of like strength levels, or
I'm.
even Shanks, Kaido, Big Mom.
It's really weird because the longer this fight draws out, the longer the legend of the Yonko, more specifically Kaido and Big Mom, is sort of damaged to me in a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
because the thing is, they were hyped up to such an insane degree.
but
Now all they can do is come down.
but I mean, even in terms of just like them as individuals, right? They're ridiculously strong in their own right, but they don't necessarily have that same skill level, which is a good balancer for other people to like give them a challenge that don't have their natural, seemingly impossible to gain defenses or strength and all that sort of stuff. But like, I think it's really interesting here how this is sort of just poking holes through whatever it is that we think that the Yonko are or capable of, if that makes sense. Because I mean, if Shanks has Rio, right, and him
Yeah.
being here implies that he has Rio, and we know that Shanks is an armament master from the Viva cards, right?
Yep.
What is to like? Why is Rayleigh not here? You know what I mean? We know Rayleigh has Rio, and is a swordsman. You know,
Hmm.
doesn't get that same validity. All right. You look at it and go, okay, well, Shanks stopped Kaido going to Marineford pre-time skip. Did Kaido lose in combat in some way, shape, or form pre-time skip? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I mean, realistically, even if you've got that, difference in skill there, like if Shanks was able to stop or defeat Kaido pre-time skip in some form of altercation and get to Marineford and was clean, that clean more specifically, that just makes
Hmm.
Kaido look a little bit worse because at the moment, from all the different sorts of media, the the thing that I'm seeing is in a one-on-one fight, bet on Kaido because people would say he's the strongest, most unkillable thing, and that just
Yeah.
like I've been rereading this arc up until sort of leading up to the 1,000 again, and Kaido's sustained a fair few injuries. He got stabbed by all the scabbards. He after that the scabbards all were cutting him up, and they weren't doing heavy damage, but they're doing sort of flesh wound stuff. And then even this chapter with Luffy hitting him, well, Luffy having hit him with Rio, right?
Yeah.
They've all healed. Any scuff marks he's had in previous chapters are gone the next chapter, sort of thing. So either
Yeah.
it's redundantly like low damage, or he's just got that healing factor that we haven't really tapped into yet. And it's not a matter of just like if you can beat him up, you win. It's can you beat someone up that's got a healing factor like Marco? You know what I mean? That's what puts
Yeah.
Marco above the other first commanders to me. The fact that even if he's on the losing end in a fight, it doesn't matter if you can't finish the fight.
Yeah. One thing that I will say is that Luffy's essentially been shown with this Ryu power to be practicing it, and it was like certain cases he can kind of activate it, other cases he can't. Like he kind of infrequently loses it. Similar to how we saw him do it with original Haki immediately post time skip. Um, and so like one thing that I could definitely say is I think like being able to hurt him is probably not enough on the fly, I think you have to be able to like consistently use that power that Luffy's just acquired and consistently keep on hitting him over and over and over again with like really good endurance and then just beat him in a fight. It's like
Mm.
having that power means you can fight him. Doesn't necessarily mean
Look,
you're going to
I,
beat him.
it,
You
it
then still have to be strong enough to beat him.
it's like a boss battle in a game where you can't take on the boss if you're below a certain level. But even though you hit that certain level, doesn't mean you can beat the boss. It's still
Yeah,
a raid.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
that being said, going on now, I think I'm on page 4 or 5 now, and we've got Zoro, and he's copying Kinemon's Foxfire Soul to cut Prometheus in half. We already have known for the longest that Haki doesn't hurt the homies. We know that the Foxfire cutting is a Rio technique, so even more so now we know that Rio doesn't hurt the homies as well, which is really interesting. Still keeps Big Mum with an arsenal that is very fierce even at these top tiers.
Yeah, right.
Um,
By the way, that image of Zoro running forward with his head down, about to cut it, I feel like I've seen that before. I feel like there's a reference to something
yeah,
else. Some kind of swordsman running like that.
Zoro's done it a few times throughout the story, and that's sort of his like.
I feel like I've seen it as like an iconic scene in some other like samurai-based show. I'm not sure. Whatever. I probably won't know.
I guess kind of just jumping ahead a little bit. You know, you have Law Kid and Luffy sort of doing their little gag about, don't give me orders. I was gonna do that before you told me to do it. Blah 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 blah. And then you have that hilarious moment with the damn fireballs. I could not stop laughing at that. That actually was like my probably close to top and being my favorite part of the chapter, because I love how you've got.
They really are leaning into the big meme
Yeah.
thing, because like they're literally just treating her like a joke. And then like every time Kaido's on screen, he's like, "Let's do this, let's fight," and they take it really seriously. And then Big Mom attacks them, and they're just pulling those faces.
It's
So funny.
damaging for her, because I mean the attack hits them all point blank in the face, and it does nothing.
Well, was it, or do they? I feel like the whole point of it was that they were all trying to play chicken with the fireballs, and they all saw the fireballs coming, and then right when they were about to hit their face, they like leant back slightly and just dodged.
If you go to page 9, right, where you've got their half face, and they're all sort of just like recoiling into their triple chins. The panel immediately under it, you can see them all screaming with their feet in the air, and you can see the dialogue bubble going to all of them.
Oh yeah, you can see their bodies. Yeah.
So it hit all of them in the face, and they've just gone down.
Yeah.
And
Okay, right. See, I thought that was them leaning to the side, but I guess that was them leaning away, and then it's still coming towards their face.
Yeah.
I thought it was going past their head, and they were leaning to the side of the fire.
This is also one of my favorite parts of the chapter, because this is something I've been saying for the longest, which is the Zoro and Killer dialogue, where Zoro goes, "Try not to get in my way, come as though the manslayer. There aren't many people with such a weird laugh. Fa 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 fa." And then Killer claps back with, "If I'd been using my punishers back then, as in his rotating blades, you'd have been dead meat, Zoro." And then Zoro obviously goes, "It would have ended the same." Now, currently, my view of it is Zoro is over Killer, but not because of that fight. I feel like at that fight, they were dead even. If anything, though, Killer was at a massive disadvantage, because not only could he not use Haki better because of his emotional state, but he also didn't have his signature weapon. So, like, if you have two people of the exact same strength, and you give one 2 top-tier swords, right? And the other's just sitting there with his, pocket knives, I'm going to give it to the dude with the better swords. Like, it's not even a question. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the thing as well is that, like, Zoro has 2 sword style moves, so going from 3 sword to 2 sword isn't that big of like a nerf. Whereas going from rotating punishes that you don't have to even like swing to 2 scythes, which are like one of the more complex weapons to use, because you can't stab with them, you can't necessarily slash that well with them. You have to like loop around the person, then like pull. Like they're a weird weapon. You can't really use them like an axe or a sword or anything. And they're very different to what he has. They might have like a kind of similar shape, but weapon that he uses, he literally just has to put his arm towards an enemy and it will cut them. I
And
mean, there's no skill in that
not
sword.
just that, like in those situations, he can't have his sword taken off him like he did against Zoro. It's
Yeah.
it's mounted to him, and you could almost say, like, depending on how you view it, um, he might have different attachable blades depending on what,
Hmm.
like, so Zoro, has three different tier sword or two different tier swords, and so we can swap
Hmm.
between them to do different attacks. In that, maybe Killer can swap between different blade types that he's got.
Yeah.
The
Right.
fact that the fact that Killer has a named blade made me really happy, but it's also the fact that it just sort of seems like it, it's something that went on for too long with people just sort of crapping on Killer for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It really does seem like they have a rivalry similar to Luffy and Kid. Like everyone assumes like Luffy is stronger than Kid, and it should just be a similar thing, right? You should assume Zoro is a bit stronger than Killer, but not that much stronger than Killer. He doesn't just dust him.
Oh,
Like Zoro nearly died fighting him.
yeah. Then we move on to, so we've got that mark. So if you're looking at page 11, right?
Hmm.
Top right panel, you see sort of like almost like Kaido's been hit in the throat with a metal pole, and it wraps around. So that's where Killer struck Kaido in the
Yeah,
throat. So didn't pierce the skin, didn't cut him, but it like
just left a mark.
it's hit in. And Kaido gets up and is like, "Yep, I'm fine." After that, there's no damage where Zoro cut him, so Zoro didn't use enough of Enma's power to pierce the scales either. But then we get that
Mhm.
move where it's a triple hit from the Supernova, and on page 12, you get to see for the first time Kid's giant mech, and
Yeah,
I
pretty cool.
actually love the design for this. I a little gutted though, because we know Law's got Haki, but he doesn't necessarily need it.
Hmm.
I even said in my live reaction, I know it's only shading, but like it even almost looked like for a second that Law tried to put Haki up on the stones he was about to drop on Kaido. Not that he could,
Oh yeah,
but
okay, I
it's
see
just
that.
it's just a shading effect. It just feels like
Yeah.
it feels that Luffy having Haki
Hmm.
is like second nature, and it's a good thing. And it'd sort of be a letdown if everyone just had the same level of Haki all the time. But I feel like you got to look at this in either one or two ways. You got to look at this as these are just their warm up attacks, and if these are their warm up attacks, the fact that Luffy's already using Haki is both really damaging for him and really good for him. Like he might just have so much better control now with his Haki that using this type of Haki that he used against Doflamingo doesn't even cost. It doesn't have a tax on him. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Or you could look at it that he's already having to use Haki to keep up with the same level of attacks that, say, Kid's doing in the mech, or Law's doing with his tact. Law is more acceptable just because the way his ability works, defenses are sort of 50-50. We've never seen him fight anyone top tier anyway. You know what I mean? But with Kid, the whole thing with what Gear 4 was it's just the strength of Gear 3 with the speed of Gear 2, and obviously that's a multiplier because of how force is mass times acceleration and all that sort of stuff. But the fact that Kid's attacks pre time skip were being stated to just be the same as a Gear 3 attack. And if you look at this mech, none of it's connected, so it looks like it's all floating, so he can shoot them off at that same
Yeah.
sort of attack. So to me, this is like Kid's answer to Gear 4, but it just doesn't have Haki.
Well, essentially, what this is to me is that he has got these two big arms, and he also is in this big ball, which assumedly armors him up, like make him take more punishment, and he can fly around in it. So he just flies around with his two arms, just launching massive punches, and then potentially just has some like scrap metal laying around in other places to kind of swarm attack people as well. But I feel like smaller scrap metal, he probably doesn't have the force behind them to actually do any damage to Kaido. So he needs like more mass, which is
Mm.
why the big arms are there. But to me, I just feel like Luffy's Gear 4 is like at this point it's kind of just nothing. It's just kind of like he's him
It's a
going into Gear
staple.
2. And what one question that I have is, it seems like he just used a fairly normal attack, right? Didn't have a unique name.
Didn't have a unique
Um,
name. Didn't even seem like it had Rio on it. It just seems like he
exactly. That's
tried
what I was
another
gonna say.
Kongan. Because it feels like
It
we're back
yeah.
at the point in the fight where Luffy showed, I can hurt you, but what can we do to you without having to use that yet? Like, Luffy
Yeah.
is always trying to see how far he can go in base before he has to pull out these abilities. And it almost seems like that's what's being implied with the three of them here, where they're like, this is the warm-up. And it follows through with that with the way the chapter ends, with Kaido going back into dragon form, when seemingly in dragon form he's more subjective to damage than he is in this form.
Yeah, it honestly seemed like chapter 1000 was just him like being insulted for trying to be the pirate king and just hitting him to be like, I'm not, don't underestimate me. Hitting him with a red rock. And now he's kind of returned to how he would normally start this battle by like testing his limits and like seeing how much he can do in base form. And yeah. So it's almost like this chapter was kind of the start of the fight
Yeah.
in a sense, where they're just kind of seeing what they can do against him. Whereas last chapter was more about the story of him walking up, seeing the all the retainers, and then getting a hit in because he's being insulted. However, yeah, the thing is that it's base Kongon. There's no fire attribute there. It doesn't look like there's any kind of Ryu, so I'm assuming there is none. And seemingly the only effect that his punch would have really done, because he knows it wouldn't hurt him, is that he's punching him forward. I'm assuming while it is punching him from the sides, and while the stuff's like, I'm assuming he's kind of getting crushed from all three directions, as opposed to them being individual.
I think it's like a one after the other. Like, Luffy punches him, and it just sort of, even if you want to say Kaido winces, just as like thinking there might be a Rio on it or something. It's like Luffy punches him, Kaido goes to brace the attack. The attack does nothing. While he's focused on Luffy's attack, Kid comes in with a punk vice, does the crushing attack. Once the crushing attack's done, Kid sort of leans back while Law drops, a ton of rubble on him. And I'd like to point out,
Yeah, right.
he's screaming during the rubble landing on him. So
Yeah.
he's kind of gurgled before, but then the rubble lands on him. It's just like, you know what I mean? And then we end the chapter.
Well, it seems like those exclamation points when Kongon hits him and when Punk Vice hits him, seems like they're both basically Kaido being shocked at the fact that he's actually getting hurt from it. Because potentially they're not even, like, probably not much, but they're not even using Rio now, and he's taking a little bit of damage because it's just how hard they're hitting him potentially. So he takes the Kongon, which he's taken plenty of times before, and he didn't care about, and it hurt him way more than he thought it would. And then he took the Punk Vice and actually crushed him a little bit, right? And then he got hit by the final one, and that was when he's finally like letting out the because he's been hit, for the third time, and all three is kind of surprising because there's exclamation points on each three hits. So it's almost like each three hits has surprised him by how hard they actually hit him. And then it was only on the third one that he was like, okay, this is a bit much now. And then he starts going, and then he goes, when he actually takes damage. So it's almost like if somebody, imagine like someone punches you in the stomach. They don't punch you that hard, but they punch you enough that like if they got you in the right spot, they'd probably like wind you a little bit. If you got hit like that, you would go, like you wouldn't expect it to hit you that hard.
Yeah, definitely.
So it seems like those first two hits were kind of that, and then the third one was like, okay, it's a third hit now. Now I'm actually starting to hurt. So it doesn't seem like it did too much damage, but it did seem like it was hurting.
The way I see it, right, is, and if you go to the last page of the chapter, the double page spread, which by the way looks damn stunning. We're back to sort of the warm-ups. With, in all honesty, like it's weird in a sense because everyone's taking it serious. Like Luffy's in Gear 4, Zoro's got his bandana on, Kid's already mech'd up. They're all ready to fight. Big Mum's, on Prometheus with a flaming Napoleon. She's like in her battle state. The only one that you could almost argue isn't taking it serious yet is Kaido.
Yeah.
And it might just be for the thematic, the thematic reasoning behind it, but going into the dragon mode instead of potentially a hybrid or something just shows that he's still like, you got one good hit in on me when I wasn't expecting it. Now you guys are doing some hits, you're doing a little bit of damage, but you're still not here. You know what I mean? Which, the fact that this stuff's happening now, and again, Act 3 isn't over, says to me, we're losing here. Like, if this isn't the conflict of this arc yet, and with the way we're setting up, or if in the next couple of chapters, if this starts getting off screened a little bit while we start setting up all the other people's fights a bit more, if that doesn't
Yeah.
happen, this isn't what Oda's classifying as a conflict of this arc, and that's terrifying.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy.
Like if that
The
if
only thing that I see though is I don't. The only thing is that I don't see how um everyone's going to get stronger because I don't see like a possible. Like I could see Luffy just kind of right now he's fighting. He doesn't have very good control over the Ryu, and then he just gets better control over it. Um, but for everyone else, like I don't see Kid just going, "Hey, I'm just going to suddenly apply that to my medal now."
well,
Now that I've seen you use it, you know what I mean? Like I don't see any of them getting like a massive power up yet. All I see is Luffy getting a bit used to more used to his power up, and Zoro getting a bit more used to Enma.
I see.
You know, a full damage slash right now of Enma is going to be a full damage slash of Enma.
I don't necessarily agree because I see that there's a massive potential here for this to be like a collaboration, like a group project sort of thing, where Luffy's the one with the haki. If Kid has an awakening, and that's what's carried him in the New World, right? So you
Hmm.
you have two different potential power structures there. You have Zoro, who isn't an agility based fighter and is more a power based fighter, and Killer, who's an agility based fighter but doesn't seemingly carry the same weight behind him, and Law, who's just got the abilities to bypass people but also swap people around. I could definitely see sort of like when the Straw Hats have a team up fight. That that sort of mechanic of them learning what each other's strong suits are and then trying to implement their own one. Like I could see I don't see Kid ever learning Future Sight, but I could see Kid having seen Luffy use that kind of haki. If Luffy starts using it a few more times, Kid seeing it and trying to attempt it himself. I see sort of Killer flipping around and doing that sort of stuff, and Zoro sort of thinking to himself, is like, oh, maybe I could do something a bit more similar to that to get a bit of a better angle out for a projectile slash or something. You know what I mean? I could see
Yeah.
I could see them sort of bouncing off each other's techniques to try and improve themselves. Like if you had Kid throughout the course of this fight go, "Oh my god, all right, that's haki. Let me try to implement that same type of haki," and he's failing at it, but he's learning it bit by bit. And you have Kid also utilizing an awakening, and Luffy's seeing how he's like activating the awakening. And because they don't have similar powers, but they're both parameters, it might make Luffy start to get an understanding of how to use an awakening for his own fruit. You know what I mean? If you give that sort of stuff to them, like obviously that's a lot of speculation. I could it's in this stage at the moment where it's sort of in limbo, where it could either just be this is the Luffy show and his supporting cast, which it is a lot of the time,
Mhm.
or it could be these are your contemporaries, not just being told that. You're obviously going to stand out because you've got the main character and you've got the end goal. You're going to achieve the end goal by the end of the day. But like it's at the point where it could go either way. You know what I mean? Like this could be the death of Kid as a useful character. The fact that we only know he's got Conqueror's Haki. We don't know if he's got observation or armament. It's one of those things where it's like he could just be out the window in a chapter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like I think he's gonna have to have like observe. Like the thing is that I think he kind of has to have observation armament because like if Kaido can move so quick that like he can hit Luffy regardless of Luffy's future sight. Like Luffy kind of sees it coming, but still isn't quick enough to get out of the way. I think Kid has to have perception haki to even be able to defend himself, because that amount of speed would be like near lightning, probably lightning speed. So he would literally just like be at you and like immediately. So unless you can kind of perceive that happening, um, I don't see Kid lasting even like 2 seconds against Kaido. And Kid seemingly fought against Kaido for a little while.
Yeah. Well,
Without
that's
originally fighting him.
that's also interesting. The fact that we're seeing what Kid and Killer have brought to the table here, and Killer didn't hurt Kaido, but he definitely like landed a blow on him. And the fact that
Yeah.
we were told that they fought until they dropped, that's a little bit of credit in their camp there. Um,
Yeah. I think a big problem though is that like what how do you see Killer getting stronger? Because that was seemingly like some like one shot death guillotine killing move, right? Like the
yeah.
I'm gonna aim for your neck and if I hit it you're gonna die, except it didn't
See,
do any damage to Kaido. So how is he getting stronger? Is he going
Kill.
to somehow get like a legendary Punisher blade,
I
or is
don't
he gonna?
think it'll swap up the
Yeah.
blades. I think again that's where Killer's stagnated a bit. Where if Killer had those blades, he would have been able to beat Zoro when they did their 1-on-1 when they were both nerfed. At least
Hmm.
Zoro with two blades in that situation, he would have beaten him. But now that Zoro's got Enma, Zoro's taken that step again. So it's like that that's still like sort of been left in the dark, and that's purposely been left ambiguously there, where you can go like nerf Zoro versus nerf Killer equal each other. Give Killer back his stuff without a nerf, and then give Zoro back his stuff without a nerf, but give him a power up, and Zoro's in front of him. It's like a lazy
Yeah.
way of just doing that power scaling. With Killer
What I
here,
mean is, if
though,
Killer's now doing null damage, um, Zoro has the ability to use Enma to suck out tons and tons and tons of his haki to do a lot of damage. So Zoro has the ability. It would exert a lot of effort and probably not be super efficient, but he has the ability theoretically to actually hurt Kaido. Whereas Killer doesn't have Enma. Killer doesn't have a weapon that can suck out all of his haki. So the only way that Killer now gets a power up and starts to do damage is either he somehow gets another blade, which I don't see happening either, or he just gets better at imbuing haki into his sword. But then if he can damage Kaido with his own haki abilities, and Zoro can't unless he has Enma, that would also mean okay, well, Killer's stronger, and the only reason why Zoro's doing anything is because he's
but
getting
then
carried
in
by
that
his
same
weapon.
situation, you could also say that if Killer used Enma, he'd suck out all his haki and you'd just drop dead like the fodder. Just because you got
Well,
to regulate the haki better. Just because you can put more out doesn't mean you can stop it being ripped out. Um,
yeah, I mean, no. What I mean is that like for Killer to be able to use like so Zoro used Enma but didn't use like a lot of the power of it, right?
mhm.
Couldn't damage Kaido. Killer, you did a normal attack, probably using whatever haki he has available, couldn't hurt Kaido. So for Zoro to get strong enough to hurt Kaido, he needs to use Enma to suck out heaps of haki. So that would mean that without and if Killer didn't have Enma, the only way for him to then start hurting Kaido is to somehow just get better at haki to the point where his natural haki abilities allows him to exert as much damage as Zoro's with haki
Yeah.
abilities.
See,
Sorry, with Enma abilities. You know what I mean? Like Zoro, like, it's almost like putting a bunch of shadows into Luffy, making him shadow like Nightmare Luffy versus just normal Luffy. If normal Luffy got as strong as Nightmare Luffy, you would assume that he's just better
mm,
because he doesn't have to have the shadows to be stronger.
how I see it right is Killer only needs that haki dealing with Kaido at the moment. And I don't mean that he can just cut up Big Mum, but because Big Mum's got a sword, he's able to parry Big Mum and her sword without that same necessity. And where his power up could come in, and why I think he'll be stagnated a touch, is because his power up could come from Kid, just fleeing him faster and further. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that
Like
could
they
it
could
could
have better
actually
combos.
even be yeah. I mean, it could actually even be Zoro and Kid have like a really good combination, and them two equal one of Zoro, one of
Mm.
you know what I mean? Because like not that like they're half as strong, but
But they're
that
better at
they
fighting
can't
as a
hurt
team
Kaido.
and they do it
Yeah.
more efficiently. Because I mean, I'm still waiting for the moment where if everyone gets knocked out, but Law and Kid, right? Could you imagine
Yeah.
if Kid picks up Wado Ichimonji, the Sandai Katetsu, and Enma, and whatever Killer's blades are, and say the first time he's able to use Rio, he makes a giant fist with them as like the fingertips, like the sword fingertips, and then just
Yeah.
shoots that into Kaido or Big Mom. That would be damn devastating.
That'd be pretty sick. Yeah.
And again, because he's metal, like it sounds really stupid in a way to have to say it like this, but Luffy's rubber. So like if they're punching at the same speed, sort of thing, Luffy's
Yeah.
sort of hurting a little less than what Kid's hurting. And so maybe this is Oda's way of saying like Luffy with armament haki on his rubber is sort of equivalent to just sort of Kid's attacks here, but then Luffy's skill is where he's gonna just outshine Kid past here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what I would have liked to see actually when Luffy first mastered Haki, like just basic armament, was them mentioning that because he's rubber, he actually punches softer, and that now that he has armament haki, he can harden his hand. So now his punches do way more damage.
Mm.
And so that they're basically saying that before him being strong enough to like punch through buildings and like mountains and shit like that was actually him punching with a rubber hand. Whereas now that it's like a hard hand, he's doing like way more damage, which I think would have been a really cool power up for Luffy. And now you would know that. But
Well,
I would say that it hasn't really ever been implied that he punches lighter because his hand's rubber.
not because it's lighter, but I feel like you could make the argument that he punches harder with Haki for the simple fact that, just sort of thinking about it, Luffy pre-time skip versus a Pacifista when they had their team up move. Um,
Yeah.
Luffy was using Jet Gatling and it was like hurting his hand from memory. So like a Gear 2 punch hurt when he was using it, and then he had to go Gear 3 to beat
Right.
with Zoro and Sanji also doing
Yeah.
their attack. But then you have him come back, learn Haki, sidesteps a Pacifista, one shots him with a Gear 2 punch in the neck, and then one shots it.
Hmm.
So it might be one of those things where it's show don't tell, and it's just sort of left for those people that want to look into it that much.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Um,
a lot of the stuff it really is show don't tell.
One Piece does a good balance of like show don't tell, tell don't show, mystery.
Yeah. I think a
Um,
big thing with it is like everybody wants to power scale to such an extent, but Oda just wants to write a story.
which is why Law is like the best wild card ever because, and we've gotten a comment here, so we've gotten two comments: Kaido versus Whitebeard and Law versus Dofi. Law versus Dofi, I'm just going to answer Dofi beats Law any day of the week just because Law can't keep his emotions in check, and Dofi's whole thing that even though Law's got a better fruit, Dofi's better with his fruit and manipulating people, and Law fell for the manipulation.
Yeah, I think Dofi's been like really heavily understated. I think he's actually way stronger than like what people
Oh,
seem because like the thing is that he was, yes, he got like kind of fodderized by Gear 4. I think the reason that he gets so understated is because he got fodderized fairly hard by Gear 4, and then Luffy then went on to fight a third division commander and couldn't break through, like couldn't hurt him
yeah.
with Gear 4. But I think the implication there isn't necessarily that Dofi now has to be weaker than a third division commander. I think it's just that Cracker was extremely hard. That was his
Yeah.
whole thing.
Yeah.
That's his entire, like, he wasn't scary offensively at all. Like he kind of probably is, but they never like made a point
I
to
mean,
like say not only is he really hard, but like if you mess up once, he's gonna destroy you. He literally was just a bunch of random soldiers with
I
swords. He didn't have any like unique sword abilities that were like terrifying or skilled. He was just hard and had a lot of
looking
crackers.
back at the Cracker fight, right? You have Doflamingo attacking Luffy, not able to cut him. You have Cracker attacking Luffy, and he's cuts halfway through his forearm when Luffy does a
Yeah.
Kong gun that catches him off guard. You have Cracker as well. We know that Rio is the ability to imbue Haki into other stuff, so we know he can Haki up his sword. But in terms of his Biscuit soldiers, he seemingly didn't use Haki on any Biscuit that wasn't the one he was in. And with the ones that he
Yeah, right.
wasn't in, they were still tanking gear for attacks because he did an ability called Hard Biscuit. All that says to me
Yeah.
is his defense, even without having to use Haki, is equivalent to like gear 4 attacks. He's all defense with a reasonable offense and numbers, which is devastating. But it's like he's still, even though I think Dofi wouldn't be able to beat Cracker because of that, you put
Mhm.
Dofi up against the Beast Pirate commanders, and in all honesty, so far from what I've seen from them, I think Dofi has a damn good time beating them.
Yeah.
Like,
Like, yeah, I mean, I think Dof, like people like I think Mihawk gets a lot of hype and a lot of credit, but I think like Dofi and Boa are like really heavily
it,
understated. I think they're actually like pretty high up there. Like they could take out a considerable amount of
I
people.
was thinking about it the other day, and if you're looking at the Warlords, the fact that, apart from the fact that Crocodile went out first, Crocodile seemingly didn't have Haki pre-time skip when he fought Luffy, and the fact that Blackbeard was actively trying to take on Crocodile because he was the weakest warlord, it's sort of a blank statement that Crocodile was the weakest warlord.
Yeah,
Then we have Moria, who's the only warlord that got culled for being too weak, so you have to assume he's the second weakest.
Yeah.
because they literally cut him from the ranks, going, we can't have any more weak people after Crocodile. I'm sorry, you're out.
Yeah.
If those are the two
And I mean,
weakest,
like, think about it. Like, Crocodile was hanging out near the start of the Grand Line, where people didn't have Haki. Like, which is why, like Smoker, for example, is basically stationed, um,
he's a rookie
in the
crusher
in
on
the
the,
position
yeah.
as a rookie crusher because no one there had Haki. So he was basically just like immortal versus those people. And then Crocodile was basically just like a slightly stronger version of that, right? He was just a dude who had a Logia. He wasn't necessarily that strong, but he had a slightly better Logia than Smoke, and he could just wreck people a bit easier. And he was just mass slaughtering like pirates, and that's why he was just good in his role. But in terms of like a let's take all of the warlords to Marineford to fight a Yonko, he wasn't really up to snuff because he's going to be fighting people with Haki.
Hmm. Um, and I know everyone's got their own opinions on this, but for me, if you look at the original Seven Warlords, no, I don't think anyone can argue portrayal wise that Mihawk's regarded as the strongest. So I feel like Mihawk's a cut above the rest, and then beyond that, all it is speculation what other people think. Personally, right, I think it's Mihawk, then based on her ability, Boa. After Boa, it's a sort of toss up between Doflamingo and Kuma, and how you see Kuma actively working when he had his consciousness, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then Jinbei, Moria, and Crocodile. And the fact that there was such a massive jump in power between Jinbei and Moria, um, like, and you got to think about it. Like, Jinbei, if Jinbei's the third weakest person out of that organization, that says a hell of a lot about
Yeah.
that organization.
Yeah, that is true.
Like,
Because Jinbei is like pretty top tier.
Jinbei is arguably second commander level. Like, he's taken on
I would
Ace.
say definitely.
He's
Yeah,
taken
yeah.
on people like Smoothie. He's fought Big Mom a couple times now. And if he's the third weakest, that just says tremendous stuff about the people that you put above him. Kuma's one of those people where it's like, he's either ridiculously broken or easily dealt with. And you can't, everyone will have their own perspective of it, but you can't actually say what it'll be because we never saw him with his mind. Um, we only ever saw him in a rookie crushing situation, and you can have speculation past that, but he's the hardest person to rank. Past that,
Mm-hmm.
Doflamingo, we saw what he did, and it's ridiculous. Doflamingo is ridiculous. Boa, ridiculous. She's got the exact same feats that you can give Doflamingo, essentially, in terms of, like, credits to her ability outside of an awakening. But then,
Yeah, I just think that like generally like if you think about Dofi, it's Perception Haki, Armament Haki, Conqueror's Haki, Awakened Devil Fruit, and his strings are so strong that like strings have so much utility and so much like he's got so much maneuverability, etc. He has a clone, and his strings are so strong that you need a gear 4 punch to even
see,
like push them away, right? Otherwise, no, you haven't seen people cut them. You haven't seen people bat them away, other than
well,
like Luffy
Luffy,
blocking
yeah.
them with a Hakied fist. But that's like blocking them. You've never seen him actually like punch towards the strings and like blow through
Actually,
them
yes, we
until he
did.
went into Gear 4.
In Gear 4 we saw him do it. Before Gear 4,
Yeah, in
no.
Gear 4 he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And
So what I'm saying is like you need Gear 4 level power to even get through his strings.
and
So unless you're comparing him against someone who has like Gear 4 level attacks, I don't think anyone's getting to
and
Dovi. Like they can't reach him. They'll just fly
that
backwards with
is
his
the
strings and
only
throw
reason as
strings at
well
him.
why I say that Cracker's over Doflamingo in a one-on-one, but overall Dofi's over Cracker. Like, because Luffy's Gear 4 punch literally goes through an overheat and smacks Dofi in the face. And Gear 4 sort of overwhelmed Dofi until Dofi pulled out his awakening, but even then it dealt with him. Whereas with Cracker, a Gear 4 fist is cracking a shield that he can immediately replace.
Honestly, I just think Cracker had such a good showing against Luffy when he was introduced, and I just think like I really want to see Jack go into an all out fight with someone that we can kind of power scale him
Yeah,
pretty well again, because I want like a solid
What's a third
determination of what a
commander?
third division commander is.
Yep.
Because every time you think about crack, you're like, oh, well, if Luffy couldn't break his crackers, then like no one can beat him and all this. And he's got unlimited cracker soldiers and all this stuff. His power sounds so ridiculously broken. But then you look at any other third division and they're not that good. You look at a bunch of second divisions, and you're like, yeah, that dude
But
could beat that person. There's plenty of people that I would be like, yeah, they could probably beat Smoothie, but I can't
see,
argue that they'd beat
the
Cracker.
thing
So
about that
I
is as
think
well.
Cracker just had a too good of a showing. Honestly, I
But
don't think he's as strong as we think he
the
is.
thing about that is as well, he's all defense and all offense, but his HP's on 1.
Yeah, that is
So
fair, but the thing is like if you can't do 1 damage, then
yeah, and that might be the equalizer because like Big Mum's crew compared to Kaido's crew for one basis with the commanders,
hmm
I'm giving it to Big Mum's Pirates so far. If I was gonna throw in a toss up between them, like
yeah.
Cracker versus Jack, even if Jack can destroy the Crackers, you can sort of dogpile Cracker the same way that the Minx did.
I think it's really hard. Um, I think it's really hard because when we were getting introduced to all of Big Mom's crew, the whole point of that arc seemingly was just hyping the hell out of Yonko. Like the whole arc was like, I'm only a third division commander and look how powerful I am. I'm only a first division commander and look how powerful I am.
Honestly,
Big Mom could one shot me if she wanted to. I'm Big Mom. If I go crazy, no one will ever be able to stop me. Like they make it seem like they're trying to make it seem like Yonko are
it
just
felt like
gods.
Whole Cake Island feels like almost like a pre-introduction for this arc, where we can't fit all the characters in one arc. So the ones that we're not going to use this arc, we're going to show you and show you them well now, and then
Yeah.
throw them away for the next arc. And that you've already been introduced to all the people that you need to know on Big Mum's side. So when they show up, you don't need that same character and introduction sort of stuff. We can just focus on the Beast Pirates, but you know where they stand and you know what they're doing. Like Perispero, you know what I mean?
Mhm. But here's the thing, like, if you don't think about it too hard, and you compare like Jack against Cracker, Cracker seems better. If you compare Smoothie against Queen, you'd assume Smoothie's better. If you compare King against Katakuri, everyone would say Katakuri's better. But then when you look at the bounties,
Opposite.
the Kaido crew should just be stomping them all.
Hmm.
Like it should be like Jack fighting at a very slight disadvantage against Cat, really.
It'd be like King 2v1ing the commanders
Yeah.
and putting them through the ringer.
So like it's weird. I think we've just had a really ridiculously over the top showing of all Big Bum's commanders, and then
We-
during Wano we just had a really crap showing of Kaido's. But I don't know how at the end of this whole arc, when we've seen everybody finish their fights, I don't know how we're probably going to feel quite a bit differently.
Okay, so since we're talking about like we're going down that rabbit hole of power scaling and stuff like that, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
bring it up again and ask your
We
opinion.
do have that other comment though. We have the Whitebeard one.
Oh, the Whitebeard versus Kaido. Do you want to give your thoughts on that first? Because I know what my thoughts are.
Where yeah, I mean I know we're going to disagree because you've had this kind of
Yeah.
fairly recent theory that Whitebeard's just like god tier strong. Um, um, I think in his old age, I think Kaido. My kind of theory behind it is Whitebeard was basically Roger level in his prime, but then we've been shown fairly often that like when characters get older, they get a little bit weaker. We haven't necessarily been shown that like their damage output goes down, but we have been shown that their endurance goes down a lot. And then on top of that, you've got Whitebeard having a sickness that makes his endurance go even further down. So I think his quakes can kind of make up for his old age in terms of strength losses, because his quakes I think are sort of like a set strength. They're just insanely powerful. Even if you just get the fruit freshly, you have powerful quakes like that. Um, I think the whole thing is that like Whitebeard still does as much damage as he did in his prime with a punch, but I think his endurance and his fighting capabilities and skill is way lower. So I think as long as you don't get smashed by him immediately, if you fight him for a long period of time, you can wear him out and eventually beat him. So I think anyone who you would consider on his tier, then I think that person beats him. It's a similar thing to like Garp. It's like I think Garp probably has enough damage to like mess up an admiral, but I don't think he's strong enough to like fight them for days because he'll just get old. He's old and he'll just get tired and then lose. That's kind of my opinion with like all of the old folks. Like
So
Rayleigh was fighting pretty well against Kizaru, but then he very quickly got tired and was like, "Oh, I can't keep this shit up." And I think that's like a pretty significant thing with the old characters. I think they still hit as hard, but they don't hit for as long.
I am inclined to agree. The difference is just like the way we let the drop sort of angle, where like if we're using evidence here, in Water Seven, or the end of Ennie's lobby, when Garp shows up and he's throwing the cannonball, he said he's only at half the strength that he used to be in his prime.
Yeah.
So if we're saying that he's at half the strength he used to be in his prime, you could
Well,
even if it,
technically, he said he could throw them twice as
yeah,
fast.
yeah. But even if you wanted to use that as an example, right? If you take a moment and just go, if Garp had a bounty, who do you compare him to? You compare him to the Yonko. More specifically, Whitebeard and Roger to some extent, right?
Yeah.
If you had someone that had a 5 bill bounty, right, and you drop that bounty by half, that's 2.5 billion bounty. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, if you've got a 2.5 billion berry bounty, you're still doing a significant amount of damage to someone like Marco without immediately one-shotting them. You know what I mean? It
Yeah. Right.
it is like lazy power scaling, but you can even like sort of see like yeah, they're not what they used to be in the prime, and if you put them up against the people in their prime now, you lose. But like
Mhm.
that's sort of just like a staple. The difference being to me is what Whitebeard lost was some of his haki, because using haki put a strain on his body, whether it was Conqueror's observation or armament. I feel like all of that was dropped a little bit. But if you look at that, right, his observation haki was so good that in his sleep, a millisecond before danger would occur, he'd immediately be up and awake and take the person out. And we've seen that over and over. You put that same thing
Yeah.
against Big Mum, and Big Mum's out cold. Like we saw the whole Jinbei Brook thing in Whole Cake, where she's just got no awareness from that perspective. Okay, so you go okay,
Right.
Kaido's Whitebeard's situational awareness seemingly was higher than theirs in the past. So now that it's
Hmm.
dropped, it's sort of leveled out there. Same thing with the Rio. We know Kaido and Big Mom don't have Rio seemingly. We've seen Whitebeard with Rio and use it on a sword without his ability and clash equally with someone. Even if you take that off him, all you're telling me is you've taken him from up here and put him down here with these people. Now, in terms of endurance, speed, and defense, oh, sorry, I should say tankability, endurance, right?
Yeah.
That's where he's taken the hit the worst to me, where I don't think he's as agile or as fast paced as he used to be as his prime. And to me, that's where he would slip up if he did slip up. But
Hmm.
I don't think the Guru Guru no Mi loses any potency based on age. And so that's where, if it wasn't for that one specific fruit, I would say I'd say Whitebeard has lost there and that Kaido would immediately dick on him. But to me, the Guru Guru no Mi is no different to having Rio. It achieves the same effect, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I big time agree with that. Like, that's essentially what I was, yeah, saying was that you keep the same power no matter what. Like, no matter how physically strong you are, if you have that fruit, you punch at that set pace, right? I think the thing that Whitebeard lost though is um general haki, which like more for defense as opposed to
Yep,
offense.
no, I
Um,
agree because his
and
observation
then
haki sort of went down the toilet. As we saw in
yeah,
Marineford,
exactly.
he had to tank attacks that normally he wouldn't even let hit him.
Yeah. And then also like endurance in terms of like being able to fight hard. And I think another really big thing would be like swiftness, speed, because I could totally see a prime Whitebeard just running through the crowds at Marine Ford and just letting out like tens and tens of quakes in every direction, and just everyone close to him just gets wiped and pushed
Mm-hmm.
away, and they have to just send the admirals in right away to even like stop him, to actually make him stop and fight someone. Otherwise, he's just going to keep barreling through everybody. Whereas he kind of just sat in his ship and just kind of like threw out quakes here and there because he wasn't that quick. We didn't see him move that quick. And then when you compare him to Kaido, Kaido moves seemingly like lightning quick. And so I would say if Kaido is that much far, if Whitebeard wasn't that much quicker in his prime, then I would put Kaido currently above Whitebeard in his prime, because Kaido is literally like lightning quick,
Yep,
whereas Whitebeard was kind of just like a dude walking,
yep.
like he was just like a fit dude running, like yeah. So I would say like he's probably lost quite a bit of
See,
mobility as well.
the difference is to me how I see it is from a distance. I give the edge to Whitebeard with the quakes and the fact that he can control the sea and that. at closer quarters combat, the thing he's got to watch out for is the speed of Kaido. But realistically, to me, we've seen Whitebeard use his Quakes as a barrier, and it works in seemingly like a 180-degree radius at a time, where he can just put general force out in one direction, and nothing can come closer from there. And so to me, the fact that that's from his fruit and fruit based means even though he's lacking in these defensive abilities these days, it doesn't stop him just going, all right, here's my preemptive shield when I'm fighting a top tier. Because we saw that against our Kiji and Akainu, where their Logia powers couldn't even get any closer to him because he just outright negated the force coming off them. And later on, we sort of saw Sengoku block the same thing from Blackbeard once Blackbeard got the Guru Guru no Mi, where it's seemingly like if there's a cap on how much force you can put out in the One Piece world, he's the cap by default, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so the only thing I see here is if his Quake Fruit, which to me it seems like, also acts like Rio without the need of Rio, just puts that ability into an echelon where you can damage people like Big Mom and Kaido without having to drain your Haki. So even though he's deteriorated, he's still beating them. Because to me, the fact that an old sick Whitebeard was over 400 million more in terms of bounty than Kaido, and Kaido's, seemingly in his prime now and at the strongest he'll ever be. Whereas if you look at Roger was another 500 above Whitebeard, right? All that says to me is in 20 years, Whitebeard closed the gap to where Roger was in terms of bounty for whatever Roger got for finding the One Piece and being the most dangerous criminal in the world at the time.
Well, I honestly think that Whitebeard was quite stagnant towards the later part of his life. I don't think his bounty would have increased too much. I think probably when it became quote unquote Whitebeard's era, it would have had an increase. But I don't necessarily know if he would have done too much afterwards.
I agree, but how I see it is like it gets stagnant. So you put Kaido at the 4,500,000,000 or 4,600,000,000 and Whitebeard at the 5 billion, and then those 50 million increments sort of thing that tally up when their organization does something. They just get that same sort of thing added to them, like the Grand Fleet did at Dressrosa. To me, I just see it, though, as we're seeing what these sorts of attacks do that the Supernova are doing now to Kaido. And although Kaido's walking them off, they're doing a bit of damage. Whereas if you replace their attacks right now with Whitebeard's Quake, I feel like it's going to play out a lot more like Akainu versus Whitebeard, where there's going to be 5 hits, and whoever lands 3 out of the 5 hits is the victor, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I could probably see that. It's
hard
really
because
tough when you're thinking about because it's the classic old age thing. It's like, how strong is Garp? Okay, well, like I think Garp could probably hit strong enough to hurt an admiral and to fight an admiral, but I think he'd get tired real quick. But then, okay, cool. So maybe he's not going to beat an admiral, but then does that mean he like one-shots anyone below him? You know what I mean? Like he went out and punched Marco once, and Marco was like permanently bleeding despite his regeneration, which is like insane to me. Like that is seemingly like he has an ability that will just OP, like nerf anything else. It's like, oh, you can't beat me, I'm Kaido because I have crazy regeneration. Cool, but Garp can because you can't regenerate for some reason when he hits. You know what I mean? It's weird like
it's
that.
very odd to me because the more I read into it, and as you know, my fiance has been catching up on One Piece and that, and we've been doing our planning in that for our top 50 stream, which if One Piece is on break next week, we might try and schedule it in for sometime next weekend. But as we've been going through that, she's been constantly flipping back and forth on her top 50 list as to the placements for characters, and I'll just be devil's advocate and go, well, what about this, looking at this like this or this like this, and she'll go, crap, I've got to change 13 people's places on the list, run back, rearrange them, and then I'll say something, and then she'll go, crap, why'd you even say that, and run back and be like, there's just too many like little semantical things. Like to me, what we are being shown here is if the only two people that are living at the moment that Kaido had seemingly shook from being able to use Rio against him was Shanks and Luffy. And I know you could say Whitebeard, but I don't think Whitebeard was active like that in the last few years, and I know you don't think that either, because I feel like the legend of Whitebeard was sort of put up on a pedestal where no one wanted to touch him until the Marines dragged him out to Marineford. But if you sort of just had a brain fart of where I was going with that, but if you sort of look at these, if you sort of look at these levels. Oh yeah, I've really just lost the ball of whatever it was I was trying to say. Eh? What was I saying?
We're just talking about power scaling and how like little things change.
Oh,
Like, a lot.
okay, yeah. So pretty much what I was saying was we have sort of an idea that's sort of being cemented now for the last 20 years, maybe 25 years. The likes of Big Mom was stagnant. Her crew was stagnant. They've got a lower bounty because they haven't been fighting the Marines. Same with Kaido. Same with Whitebeard, where the Navy and that have to make a showing that if they come and do a big incident, they've got to send someone strong to go deal with them. But it never happened.
Yeah.
Like they might show up and have a little clash, but everyone runs away. In terms of the Yonko building their territory and fighting with each other, we haven't had an inkling that these people have seen each other in decades. Like Kaido and Big Mom, they've said how many decades has it been since we saw each other last? Do you know what I mean? It seems like their fodder are the people that are clashing. So the Yonko, in a sense, are sort of stagnant, where we've got these legends built up around them, and rightfully so. They're worthy of their legends, but there are people that don't have these legends built around them, that seemingly, if they go up against them, would have a lot better of a showcasing and dismantling that legend. The likes of the admirals, you know what I mean? Because if you look at 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever, in the One Piece timeline, you have Kong as fleet admiral, Sengoku as an admiral, you have Zephyr, if you want to use him as a canon idea, as an admiral, and then you have someone else as an admiral that we don't know of, or no admiral at that point, and Garp was being offered the position of the admiral role, right?
Yeah.
So if you have Kong, Sengoku, and Garp there, you have three people seemingly admiral to fleet admiral level, depending on how strong you think these people are at their absolute prime. Just like I see Whitebeard and Roger elevated above the Yonko in their prime, if that makes sense. Yeah. So it's like these people are still strong, but they're not the absolute ceiling of this world. They're close to it. Like, I don't think there's any questions about it, but I feel like there's a few stops to pull out if you need to surpass them that's believable for that sort of thing to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think the big thing with the Yonko, for example, is like they have like solid basis in Haki, but honestly, I think Perception and Armament Haki is just that. It's just a basis. Like before Luffy got Rio and Future Sight, he literally just like was just some dude who had basic Haki and like a pretty low tier fruit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like realistically, that's what he had. And then you can also on top of that have a busted fruit. Then you can have an awakened busted fruit. Then you can have a ridiculous body like Kaido and Big Mom have, or maybe Kaido is because of his fruit potentially, but Big Mom at least has. Then you can have the next level version of all of the Hakis, and then there's probably like a level above even what Luffy has right now. And then there's probably something to do with like the Will of D.
I mean,
and all this crazy stuff, right?
There's potentially
like Im could just be able to solo all four Yonko by himself.
There's potentially even different avenues of Haki. Like we have Katakuri's second level of physically hardening, like his Haki, which hurt Luffy's normal regular hardening. But that's not Rio, seemingly. You know what I mean? There's still a hell of a lot of other stepping stones and levels to sort of even these playing fields with between these characters.
You've got like Fujitora being able to see people and like seeing kind of like their soul or like their kindness within themselves, and stuff like that.
And
Like
that's
potentially even Kuma. You know how he can like reject pain and things like that.
yep,
Maybe his ability is just that he can reject things that he can like see and perceive, and he has really good perception hockey, and he can literally see the pain inside someone's body, and then he because he can see it, he can reject it.
potentially.
Maybe he can reject anything that he can see, and he has some weird avenue of perception hockey as well. Yeah, it's
Ooh,
interesting in that sense. And I remember, I don't think it's going to be a thing now, but I remember like a few years ago thinking like, I think it'd be really cool if hockey, or at least Conqueror's hockey, allowed you to literally just like will things into existence. So it stops being such like a hard power system, and it becomes much more like a soft power, like kind of like magic. Like because you can have magic that has you're allowed to cast certain spells, or you can have magic where you can just kind of do whatever. Like you just kind of know how to do magic and you just do it. And so I always thought it'd be really cool to have hockey as a form of willpower, in the sense that you can kind of just will things into existence if you're good enough with it, you know?
honestly,
And what we've seen with Luffy is he doesn't necessarily comprehend that. So he's just kind of learning things, as in like if everyone could just kind of like will fireballs into existence, I could teach you how to think about it in a certain way to make a fireball exist. But if you were like a really good like a sage with it, then you would just be able to like create whatever the fuck you want out of fire. You know what I mean?
mm.
And I always thought that'd be a really cool avenue for them to go down, and that could be a thing potentially.
Oh, definitely. We've got another question here. Do you feel the Admirals are Yonko level, and do you feel the Marines and the series are the main villain?
I think the admirals can fight against Yonko, but I think they would generally lose. Um, I don't think the Marines will be the end of series villain. I think they'll be one of them, but I think the general world government will be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like Im and the Gorosei will be the series villain.
I mean, even with the Admirals versus the Yonkos now, I always go back and forth onto whether or not they're equal or whatever. Um, we know that the Marines now are apparently stronger than they've ever been, but that might not mean that they're top heavy anymore, that they're more
Yeah.
spread out evenly, where their fodder is getting better, and things like the SSG and stuff like that. If it is able to replace the Warlords, it just means they've got a
I think
better baseline in the middle to dominate the numbers aspect of the world now, as opposed to the
yeah,
top end.
I think they basically just started recruiting way more and way more aggressively with less kind of barriers. So like you'd imagine like any military organization would have, you have to meet a certain amount of specifications, like you know kind of a criminal record and all this stuff in order to join. I think Akunu was kind of just like, nah, screw that, I just want strong people who are willing to fight for the Navy. And potentially they just started recruiting a lot more people, a lot more kind of abrasive crazy people, and training people way harder, and then started making a lot more aggressive moves, started fighting more often. Where like I don't think Akinu has as much care for losing lives as Sengoku would have had. So he would have just sent a bunch of people into a bunch of different battles, and then they would, you know, the weak ones would die, the strong ones would get stronger, and then
Honestly,
eventually you just get a stronger overall
I
force.
don't even know how to feel about that whole, like the whole thing, because like you just said, you think Akainu has a lesser of a regard for lives, right? But do you know what the
Yeah.
weird thing about that is? From like chapter 0 and that, we see that Akainu studies directly under Sengoku, whereas Aokiji studies more under Garp. From a lot of the stuff we've seen in the backstory of stuff, so
Yeah,
it's
right.
interesting how it gets to the point where Sengoku's retiring and is like, oh yeah, pick Garp's apprentice, not mine. You know what I mean? Sort of, and Sengoku's always been sort of like the silver medal in a way of it.
Yeah.
I mean, that being said, like I don't necessarily mean that in terms of strength, because I feel like if you look at Marineford, I feel like Sengoku's still in his prime in Marineford, and that's the point of Marineford, is that's the last
Mm.
battle of Marineford, like the last battle of that era, because in all the lore we get, Big Mum is never associated with like Roger's era. She's always regarded as like the up and comer past that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like that battle there was the last two potential people that could have still been as good as they were uh, Sengoku and Whitebeard, and the whole
Yep.
point was it was like a massive chess battle, about who was gonna end the era, sort of thing. And like, there's a big thing in One Piece where once people's rivals um, go, they deteriorate. So they no longer need to maintain themselves in their prime, in a sense. Where like, if you have a look at when Roger got sick, Garp started getting grey hair. Once Roger died, Garp went like fully grey and just sort of quit the Marines, doing what he used to do. You know what I mean? Um, I feel like the difference is that is you see people like Big Mum, who still has all of her hair, like still coloured hair, and we're told this is the strongest she's ever been. She's at her peak now, if that makes sense. Which I think is fairly reasonable, where in terms of her physical strength and just overall her organization and everything she's accumulated at, she's still in her prime. Whereas if she loses here, if we see her in like 2 years or 3 years and she's still alive, I reckon she would have gone grey by then.
Mm, I
I,
could see that. I think it's just so hard. Like honestly, like the way that I look at it is, I don't think Oda's put that much thought into it. I just think he thinks they're all really strong. They're all like old legends that are just like powerful and they can do stuff as they can still do stuff, but not to the way that they could do stuff. And that's I think as far as he's thought about it. Like if he wants to take a really strong old person and kind of throw them into a fight and have them do something really crazy, that's cool. But I don't think he's doing that saying as a statement of saying this person is still this strong. I think he's just kind of like, well, I mean,
I,
Garp's really strong. He can go up and just hit Marco really hard and make him bleed. Like yeah, Rayleigh can still fight Kizaru, but not really, not for as long.
I think there's a
I don't
bit of
think it's
misinterpretation there of what it was I was saying. I view it
mm,
as Oda thinks everyone's in their prime until like between outside of the Straw Hats, between the ages of until you're born until you're 30, in the normal world of One Piece, you're not regarded as being in your prime. When you hit like your 30 mark till your late 50s mark, you sort of, that's what Oda considers his prime. And then
mm,
unless you're a specific person that he's going, this person's just exempt from that rule, I feel like you're in your prime while you've, got all your wits about you, while you've still got your full head of hair coloured and all that sort of stuff. Because
yeah.
the way Marineford plays out to me now is it was just a massive chess battle where you had someone that you had Sengoku and Whitebeard, right? And normally they're people that are on the front lines fighting each other, but
Mm,
it was a matter of, are you still, and is your organization still as strong as you claim to be? Where they were the kings sitting at the very back of each side of the battlefield and letting each side's numbers throw stuff at each other to see who would flinch first, because whoever flinches first gets put in check.
yeah, right.
And that sort of is how it played out in my mind, where you had, Oars, Marco, even Whitebeard himself take shots at the execution stand and nothing happened. But then you had, the admirals attacking Whitebeard, they were getting deflected. But then, Akainu smack talk squad into attacking Whitebeard, and it was like that was a moment that it was like, we can reach you. You know what I mean? You're no longer
Yeah,
in your prime, in a metaphorical sense at least, if you don't want to say physically. You're no longer who you used to be. You couldn't dodge that. You couldn't see around that. You couldn't think past that. Whereas here Sengoku is still up on the high ground, just looking down on him, just like, I got you. I've still got all the tricks. I've still got all the stops to pull out. We've got you.
yeah.
And
They
so,
did seem kind of like an old man's chess game. Like they've been at it for a while. They're not necessarily going to head the fight and be like, I'm a hero and I'm going to win this, but they're still like, they're kind of both like, I might be way past my heyday, but like I'm still a super experienced veteran
and
leader,
so,
and who's powerful in my own right, and I'm just gonna like, because the whole thing was like Sengoku set up this big trap, and then Whitebeard comes in from underground, like from under the ocean, and then Sengoku's like going, "Oh, that was a good strategy, but hey, I've got this strategy and I've got
mm,
this strategy," and they're kind of just like throwing different strategies against each other. It really did feel like a war where they had like leaders that are like fighting each other
yeah.
with Yeah, as opposed to what you normally see in like a shonen, which is like, I'm the main character, I'm the strongest, I'm the leader, I'm gonna run in head
It's
first,
it's not the
fight everyone.
mutterer. It's not the taking out everyone single handedly, running through, snapping the necks of 300 people.
Exactly, yeah. Like
Um,
the final war, for example, I don't see Luffy doing what Whitebeard did. I don't see him sitting back and like being a strategist and like organizing everything. I see him going, "Let's go," and then just running at them
to me,
with a bunch of people
Luffy,
behind.
the premise of the story is Luffy's got people for that now. He doesn't need to
Yeah,
think. He's got Big Brain Kinemon pulling out the 4D chessboard. You know what I mean?
yeah, exactly. And
Um,
yeah, and you'll have like Jinbei as like the old
see,
man with like all the old man knowledge and
the point I was more making is though, like in a roundabout way, Whitebeard had gone out of his prime in Marineford, but he could still beat the other people in their prime. The only exception for that was Sengoku, who in the past I think was above that level a little bit, because I think you could always put Sengoku next to Garp.
uh-huh.
I know a lot of other people are saying like Sengoku's got no feats that aren't next to Garp, if that makes sense. Because every time
Mhm.
we get something for Sengoku, it's always side by side with Garp. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I feel like Whitebeard got baited out to be like, he was baited out like, can you still tangle? Can you still keep up with the best of us? He lost. Once Sengoku's rival and Whitebeard passed, he retired. He went grey. He's not as strong anymore. I think the only person from that generation that is now still at their peak is Big Mom. I feel like everyone else from that age group is sort of down and out now. I feel like she's she's now the representative left over from that, and now she's being paired with Kaido, who's we're being told's the current strongest, which I'll give it to him at that he's currently the strongest in the story. But then, after this and this battle's done, it'll be the next generation almost coming up for who's the strongest, where you've got Luffy, Kid, Blackbeard, and then you'll have whatever the
Yeah.
hell's revealed with Im and Akainu, because Akainu's 55, the same age as Dragon, and I feel
Yeah.
like Akainu's still in his prime in that regard, where it's not the age as a number specifically, but it's if you still have the drive, the need, or the call to be that strong, and you're not slipping, you're in what Oda classifies as your prime, if that makes sense.
Yep, I could see that. I think it'd be really cool if like it wouldn't mm. I think it'd be cool if like Luffy like end a series, you know how he's like the Straw Hat Pirates
Yep.
and they call them the Straw Hats. It'd be cool if he had like a bunch of like generals leading his army and they each had like their own straw hat. Like he had like Cavendish wearing a straw hat with like his own little army. Like each of the people have their own straw hat and they call them, you know how Blackbeard has like the Titanic captains or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it'd be funny if like Luffy had Luffy and the Straw Hats, and all of his like minions were just wearing straw hats,
Oh,
and like the straw hat became like a symbol of power because that were like what his leaders wore. Pretty cool.
so you've seen Stampede. You saw it with me, right? All Bullet is now is just Kid's potential on screen.
Yeah,
That's
literally.
that's all I see from Bullet now. Is just like looking at Kid in his mecha right now is just like, okay, that's what you could be. So we're not going to see you ever get to that stage necessarily, but
Mm.
we're just expected to think that's what you're going to be like whenever you hit your prime. And I like to point out when I say prime and that, like, Luffy is an exemption to this, where he's in his prime while we're following him through the story. Like, people like Shanks at Luffy's age, I feel like Shanks was weaker than Luffy at Luffy's age.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think Luffy for his age is a bloody god,
Yeah,
which is the way everyone calls him like a kid and stuff. Because like he actually is like too big for his breeches. Like he's like he's like that like the like 12-year-old kid who's like advising you on business.
he's a
You know what I mean?
14-year-old
Like,
kid.
12, who are you?
He's a 14-year-old kid that rocked Muhammad Ali. You know what I mean? I was just like,
Yeah, exactly.
oh,
Yeah,
weren't expecting
yeah.
that.
It's like it's
Um,
like a it's like someone it's like a lawyer in a court case, but he's still in high school.
uh, Continuing on, have you seen the newest episode of the anime?
I haven't no. I haven't
So
been keeping up.
it covered the abolishment of the warlords.
Yep. I
They
saw a clip of them um when they have that thing where they're like, oh, don't underestimate us, we're really
yeah,
strong. I saw that as like a 2-minute video on YouTube, on my Crunchyroll.
Good episode. Probably one of the best episodes done, and it's amazing to see the Wano animation outside of Wano because it like you really get a feel for how beautiful the rest of the series is going to look going forward.
Yeah.
They put a little bit of other information in, seemingly implying. So they had filler scenes of people in Alabasta crying, implying that one of the deaths was more than confirmed to be from Alabasta. So I'm gonna say Cobra's dead.
Yeah.
We've thought of in the past. Um, Past that though, it's sort of like it's still up in the air. It almost implied that Sabo was dead with the way Dadan was crying, but I feel like it's more not that Sabo's dead, but he's being announced to be executed, or that he's announced as caught, if that makes sense. Yeah. Where Dragon and the Revs are freaking out because they feel like they're getting baited into something, which they probably are. I feel like Sabo's damaged the reputation of the Revolutionary Army because he's been blamed for Cobra's death and an attempted assassination on Vivi, and is now captured and, serving the New World plotline for Ace, if that makes sense. And obviously we've got just the abolishment of the warlords as the other part of the news article from that. So I thought that was interesting, the fact that they put a little bit more detail into that sort of thing. That being said, right, we're now at the point where we literally have the Supernova having started to clash with two of the Yonko, right?
Yeah.
What do you reckon is going to happen from here on out?
Well, it looks like it's going to be the Yonko at the top kind of dominating, the people at the bottom almost fighting it like a literal uphill battle or up sky battle. I'm not sure. It does seem like Kaido is really wanting to fight. He's also not necessarily in his fighting form, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like it's super necessary for him to fly up into the sky and come back down to the ground immediately. I think he's going to at least do an attack in dragon form before he gets maybe hit by someone and then goes, oh, okay, screw this, I'll go back into normal form. I think Big Mom's going to start making some moves. She seems to have just been ready, She was already in the sky ready to fight as Kaido flew up next to her. So it's almost like she kind of has the initiative in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think she needs to be seen doing something. By the way, it went similar to how I predicted last time we were chatting, where Big Mom tried to attack Luffy. Zoro jumped in and blocked it. I thought Zoro and Killer were going to jump in and block it. And then I thought they were going to pair up against the two, but it kind of devolved into just a mesh of people playing each other.
How does it feel knowing that between Zoro and Luffy, they counter the known abilities of these Yonko outside of their physical health? So Luffy's immune to lightning, Big Mom and Kaido both use lightning attacks. Zoro can now cut through fire, so he is essentially immune to the fire attacks of Napoleon/Prometheus and the Borrow Breath.
And if he's protecting Luffy, then now Luffy's immune to the fire, so he can cut it off.
So between the two of them, they're not getting hit by either attack, because one of the other will take the brunt of it, right? The only thing that we don't know, which if they use this next chapter, I'll actually just lose it. If Kaido does his wind slicing exhale, the slicing breath, the invisible slashes, and it just decimates them here, that would just be I'd just be you know what I mean?
Yeah. I would like to think that because the wind slashes were kind of circles of revolving wind, that seems like a killer to nullify that thing, you know what I mean?
Do you know what would be cool? If Killer has Skywalk. If Killer is Sanji with swords.
Yeah.
Considering we see how acrobatic he is, if Killer gets really serious, he starts doing the Skywalk and that, and he can do shave / Skywalk flips.
Yeah, and I mean the benefit of his weapons is that he doesn't have to spin them himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just stay rotating, which would mean that he's a lot more maneuverable while he's attacking because like if you're swinging with a big sword, as you swing, it kind of throws your body weight around. Whereas if you just have to like put your arm out and your weapon does all the work, it doesn't throw you around as much when you're attacking. So he could actually probably fight like in aerial combat much better than somebody with normal swords would.
I wouldn't be.
Because the person with normal swords would have to maneuver while they're in the air, which would be a lot harder. You basically have to use your geppo to like create rotation in your body because you wouldn't be able to just swing very well because you can't use your feet on the ground to create power through your swings. So he would basically not have to use. He would be able to just jump around in the sky much easier, and as long as he gets his hand near, his weapon will do all the work. Whereas if Zoro was doing the same thing, he would have to like geppo in like a rotation to then give himself power to swing around and try to cut someone.
Fun
which would,
thing,
like, balance off.
Zoro's only ever shown Geppo in one filler arc. He's never in the canon of the series shown that he can use Geppo.
Yeah.
The closest thing I would say is Shave when he does his lion song.
I mean, Luffy's only done it
In Gear 4.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Well, I mean,
so really the only Straw Hat who's done it is Sanji.
I mean, like, that's pretty crazy as well because like the pseudo science of in-canon explanations essentially he's kicking so fast that he's making a sonic boom that's keeping him in the air.
Yeah.
That's pretty ridiculous, man. That's like, it's pretty bad.
I mean, that would essentially imply that your kick is so fast that it can't get any faster, right? Because if you can kick so hard that like the air pressure creates like a solid platform that stops your foot and allows you to propel yourself upwards, you can't kick any faster than that. Then.
No,
because if you tried to, you would just geppo harder.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Kid in his mech and seeing what he's doing here. Does it make you feel like you've got a bit of a change of mind or a better understanding of who you reckon he went up against the red hair pirates for them to have cut his arm off? Like, I feel like it hasn't like given me any ideas, but like seeing him here, I'm like, if he could do this pre-time skip, which I've got no reason to think that he couldn't.
Yeah.
I feel like pre-time skip Kid is. He's, you know, having a real uphill fight, but he's clashing with like a fifth commander sort of thing.
Yeah.
Just sort of reasonably.
What do you mean by a fifth commander?
Like, not one of the top three, because without Haki, you're just not immediately smacking with them, right? But like, you know, he's taken out like an Oven or a Daifuku sort of thing. He's taken out one of the, like, he's taken out page one or ulti pre-time skip, I reckon. Hard fight.
So I don't know if I could put him that high above Luffy because I think he'll just get absolutely demolished. I think Luffy, would get absolutely demolished by Oven pre-time skip because he can't even get close.
Okay. Oven's not a great matchup there because Oven literally would probably melt the metal on Kid. But
yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
But like, I'm talking about that like caliber of a fighter. You know what I mean? Like seeing Kid in this, right?
Okay, well, hey, like
I could see.
Sentomaru. What do you reckon? Do you reckon he could beat Sentomaru, knowing that Sentomaru could blow his metal away? Rio?
How strong is Sentomaru? Dude's got Rio.
Yeah, it's interesting. He's got Rio. He can't be.
He's got Rio.
He's pushed by like Luffy. Luffy just like he just went, no, go away.
He's got Rio. He's the nephew of Kizaru, and he's the only leader of the bodyguard unit for Vegapunk, and then since the time skip, he's become a vice admiral immediately, or a captain or something.
He's like he's at a pretty high, like stature. Like to be fair, he probably would be because he's the family ties, but
I mean,
he's not hurt it.
I mean, it might also be a speech thing that he just calls Kizaru uncle because he's like someone of authority. You know what I mean? It might not actually be blood related.
It might even be that like they're really close friends or something. Like, yeah, they've respected work together in the past.
Honestly, Sentomaru to me is a hard one because I could see Sentomaru dropping pacifists as pre-time skip, since he's like the leader of them all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's sort of the teacher taking the kids out on a field trip
Mhm.
in a very obnoxious way. The fact that he's
Yeah.
got Rio, the fact that I think he's got observation haki too. If he's able to like foresee Luffy's gear 2 attacks, and that's faster than the speed of sound sort of stuff. Like
Yeah.
I still don't know where to rate him. Sentomaru's like a hard one. Like
I think Tomorrow is around oven level, honestly.
if you swap, if you like,
Why I
to
put
me
him in there.
oven level and that, that's where I put Moria sort of thing. Moria's that sort of like 350 mil range where um he's Moria
Mm.
is sort of like dealing with Hawkins pre-time skip, if that makes sense.
Just, I think Moria could. I think Oven could stomp Moria. As long as he doesn't get like one shot by just taking a shadow and then he just dies.
I don't
As
know,
long as he's like
man.
shaking whatever he
Moria,
does.
Moria, although he was weak and got absolutely crapped on by pretty much everyone pre-time skip, it took the move Luffy used to beat him was using Gear 3 in Gear 2, which is essentially a pre-time skip version of Gear 4 with no Haki. And it was
Yeah, yeah,
one
yeah.
hit, and the only reason it did it is because Luffy had 100 shadows and was smacking onto the Moria. Didn't even hurt Moria with the 100 shadows. It's just that Moria was inside Oars, and as Oars was getting smacked around, it was hurting Moria.
Like in fairness, like Luffy pre-time skip was kind of pretty heavy like plot armor in the sense of like, yeah, the series kind of functioned a bit differently. Like he wasn't meant to lose. So like, I mean, if you took someone who's Luffy level at Alabasta, like who you would consider equal to Luffy at Alabasta, and that person didn't have Haki, I wouldn't. I'd say that person loses against Croc. You know what I mean? Like, I think
Yeah.
Luffy like was lucky to beat Croc.
I mean,
Um,
even Luffy vs. Croc, that was 1 out of 3, man. That's you're not stronger than
yeah,
Croc
exactly.
if you're
But
doing one
then,
out of
but then
three.
to be fair, as soon as he could hurt him, he beat him.
Mm.
Like the only reason he lost the first two is because he couldn't even hurt him. But still, I think like yeah, Luffy there only wins because
Ooh, okay. Here's a question
Luffy's the
for you.
where if he can beat you, he'll beat you because he's the
Here's a
main
question
character.
for you. We got it confirmed through Viva cards and touch ups and that pre-time skipper or Blucci had observation at Arm and Haki, and seemingly the Ryogun is Rio, just a double-fisted Rio strike, right? So okay, Rob Lucci pre-time skip versus Crocodile. If you can assume that he can hit Crocodile if he can touch Crocodile,
Oh,
that that's
um,
that would be a good matchup, wouldn't it?
yeah. Did we saw Lucci do paper body?
Yep.
I think Lucci.
You think Lucci?
Yeah, I think Lucci wins.
Then that's sort of your answer, then, isn't it?
Mm, actually, I think
It's hard because if you're gonna go off like a bounty thing, Luffy got 300 mil for beating Rob Lucci, so you can pop Rob Lucci at 300 or under in terms of a threat level, right? Pre-time skip.
yeah.
The
Then
mirror,
again, they kind of did imply that a big reason why for the big increase is because he declared war on the world government during that arc.
but to them, a big increase could be 50 mil. I mean, he'd take out Doflamingo and have the entire marine system look like shit, and he got 100 mil, and everyone on his
Yeah.
crew got 50 mil.
He's actually like a pretty significant thing with power scaling is let's say you have like a power system and you have like numbers applied to it. If like number 1 is an ant, number 10 is like an eagle or like a wolf, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then like number like 15 is like a human with like a weapon, like a standard weapon, but like not super well trained. Um, something like that. Then you take like number 100. You know, that's not just like I could beat 10 wolves.
That's a
That's
nuke.
like way above. Yeah, that's like way above. Like
That's your
the
dropping a
power
continent.
scale. And then the thing is like that difference in power is the same if you take 100,000 and 101,000. Like that difference in power is still insane. Being 1,000 points above someone is the difference between an ant and like a fully well trained soldier with a machine gun.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like if a 1,000 is a well-trained soldier with a machine gun and number one is an ant, well then that difference in power holds the exact same amount of difference, even if you take 1,000 and 2,000, or 100,000, 101,000. So like in terms of bounty, someone who's 100,000 versus someone who's 300,000 has about as much chance of winning as someone who's 1 billion and someone who's 1.2 billion. Also, yeah, 1.2 billion. Like it's the same difference, right?
Mm.
So it's you're a lot more likely being able to take out someone who has a 6 times higher than you bounty if both of your bounties are quite low. If your bounty is 50 mil and you're fighting someone who's 300 mil, you actually have a reasonable chance of taking them out.
There's no precedent.
Um, Probably, yeah, because if you consider that, like, we think that Smoothie could possibly beat Queen, but Queen has a significantly higher bounty, then that's the thing, is it's like you can take those jumps. Like you're able to beat people that are like 300,000 above you. Even if your bounty is really low, you could argue like, oh, but that's 6 times stronger. But not necessarily, because you're taking the Queen, the difference between Queen and Smoothie for for difference there.
I feel
It's
like above 300 mil, the bigger the jump in the bounty, the more it's just
yeah,
a flex, but it doesn't matter.
yeah, right.
Whereas below that, it's like the difference between like Sanji. So the difference pre time skip, right, is Jin had a 12 mil bounty, just 12
Yeah.
million flat, whereas Karubi, the karate guy from the Fishman Pirates, had a 9 mil bounty, right?
Yeah.
Sanji dicked on Karubi, but got dropped heavily by Jin, and that's only like a 3 mil difference. You know what I mean? Whereas like the
Yeah, right.
lower numbers, it's super significant, but then it
Mm-hmm.
gets like if you got a bounty, if you've got a bounty up until 10 mil, right? That's a playing field. From that 10 mil to like 15 mil is another playing field. That 15 to 20 is another playing field. Then sort of the 20 to 40 or 20 to 50, and then that 50 to the 100, and that 100 to the 150, and then that 150 to 200, and then 200 to 300. Those are sort of the ballparks, and then past that, the jumps just keep getting bigger. Where it's just like, we get it, you've done some bad stuff to some people. That's why you've got the higher bounty, not necessarily because you're just stronger. Because like,
Yeah.
if you look at the Beast Pirates, like we were saying before, in terms of combative strength and that, I almost give it to the Big Mum Pirates. But the Beast Pirates, you're not just fighting one strong combatant. You're fighting one strong combatant who's durable and uses chemical weapons and isn't afraid to hurt civilians and stuff like that. It's no
Yeah, yeah.
longer it's no longer a matter of you've got to take out one really strong combatant, as this dude's a menace to society and will take
Yeah,
society
right.
down with him if he's like, it's like
Yeah.
the difference between a terrorist and a criminal in a
Like
roundabout
Shanks
way.
would take you outside of the village before he fights you. Queen would start unloading on the civilians in the hopes that you jump in front of the bullets to save the
Which
civilians.
is like a big difference to me, where if you look at Marineford and you try to swap the other Yonko out in Marineford, it doesn't work point blank. You've got to adjust it a little bit because the Marines will have different contingencies based on different Yonko invading them, if that makes sense. Like Whitebeard, they set up everything in a 360-degree radius, and they set up the bait of Ace right in the middle, and it was a come to us, we'll encircle you, and then cause damage on you from 360 degrees to the best of our ability, because we can't necessarily just take you out from a distance as a combatant. Whereas if you had Kaido's crew showing up, right? Kaido's
Yep.
crew, I feel like, is sniping Marineford or trying to snipe Marineford more than they are trying to show up in the middle of the bay to prove a point and then fight. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
you can't tell me that if Kaido picks up Onigashima and is like, we're going to Marineford, they've got Queen, we've got to go get Queen back, he's one of my hand-picked all-stars and that. You can't tell me that the likes of Jack isn't going to be sitting there with his gifters going, prepare the cannons, we're going to just fill them with the, you know, Caesar's death gas. And just try
Can you
to...
imagine? Can you imagine the Blackbeard pirates fighting, like trying to take out Marineford, like currently now, and you have the sniper Van Auger just sitting from literally beyond the horizon, just killing people,
Mm-hmm.
and no, like they don't even attack. They just like sit there for like days, and Van Auger is just sitting there, and every time he can see someone, he just kills them,
Mm-hmm.
and so. They are expecting a raid by the Blackbeard pirates, but they literally all have to just be like inside behind cover, just waiting for them to attack. They can't stand out there and wait for them to come and fight because Blackbeard just won't even approach.
Dude,
He'll just like sit there and just let Van Auger just murder
the
like everyone.
fact the fact that Blackbeard is like Whitebeard as well, but he's more flashy. You can't tell me. Instead of having Van Auger even show up, Van Auger is standing on the top of the Gates of Justice, just sitting down, sniping, right? And you
Yeah.
have the Blackbeard pirates show up, same sort of bubble situation that they did. Bay freezes and that's like, we'll deal with them. All of a sudden, you just see people dropping left and right, and there's no explanation. You can't hear gunfire. People are just dropping dead from bullet wounds. And like, what's that? Blackbeard just does a bit of a quake to just get rid of the surrounding cover to the best of his ability. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, people are just dropping left and right. You have people dropping from gunshots. You have people dropping from sword slashes and that. And Blackbeard's just sitting there in the middle laughing, creating a pool of blackness out from him. Like, that's a very different type of battlefield to going up against one
Yeah.
dude with the Quake fruit just sitting in the middle, just like, come on, come at me with the best you got.
Yeah. I'll tell you what. I've been like reading these web novels and like I have so many chapters, like hundreds upon hundreds of chapters of just like reading them. And so I've been so spoiled recently of just being able to read through an entire fight, not realizing that it's like that's like 20 weeks of content.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That like in one piece you'd have to wait for. And like I'm imagining a fight with like Blackbeard against like a whole bunch of people, and I just keep thinking like, damn, they should just do that. All I think about is just like they should just do it. You just draw the whole thing real quick,
Mm-hmm.
as if it's not going to take like an entire year's worth of chapters to actually draw
Look,
that fight.
look
There's
at
better things to
kids.
draw than that.
Look at kids' mech. That mech alone took half a day.
Mm.
Just,
Honestly, 'cause there was a lot of concept art there, I imagine.
and I'm not even mad. It looks sick. Have you seen the back of it? It reminds me
Yeah.
of the Golden Soldiers from Hellboy.
Although I will say, how the hell did he take a bunch of random scrap metal and suddenly he has like perfect rings? I mean, there are like massive, perfectly like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, perfect rings that do not look like they've just been a bunch of metal thrown together.
I
It's like
mean,
they're welded as a ring.
who says with his magnetism and that he can't crush the metal to shape it however he wants? We've never seen him do it, but
Yeah.
pseudoscience. I'll tell you what though, he's got cannons on one of his hands in the palm of his hand.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So I never really imagined Kid as the person that uses cannons, but do you know what would actually be cool? Because you can see some tubing on it. If he's set up like a
Yeah.
flamethrower, because we saw as a kid that Kid was into like playing with robots and stuff like that. Imagine if he set up like flamethrowers and stuff like that in the hands as well, and that's how he'll deal with like Prometheus and stuff like that.
I want to see a scene of Luffy doing the star eyes like he does with Frankie after Kid does a move. He's like, awesome. And then Kid looks at him and then he tries to act like he doesn't care.
No, no. Imagine it's like a Sundari. Sundre.
Yeah.
There we go. It's a Sundre situation where they do a move and they're like pouting, like that wasn't cool, but they've got the star eyes looking away from them.
Yeah.
Like I could definitely see them doing that because they don't want to give each other credit, but they're like, that was so cool.
Yeah.
So law
Do
here.
we want to do final topics? Because I have to go in like 10. 15 minutes.
Yeah. No, I was about to say close it up at 2 hours. Law. Sort of just chilling in the back here, not really doing anything, just doing what we were saying, where he's going to play support and just swap people around when they're about to get hit, which is good.
Yeah.
But dude,
But it does show. Sorry, it does show that Luffy has some room to grow because he kind of just went in gung ho, and they were like, Law had to be like bail him out. Like you only got one shot again,
dude,
buddy. Calm down.
Yeah, no, and it was bad. Like he clubbed him with the side, like he was literally just the tip of the club across the eyes. That was rough.
Yeah.
Still holding out hope that Law just personality transplant or room and just starts messing with them just a touch. Just just enough to screw with them in that. Even if it's something as simple as like, you know how he does tact and he like sends up the shards of rock?
Yeah.
Tact and does the opposite where he drops out some of the footing if they're on the ground or something like that. Or even uses tact to like launch like Kid Killer or Zoro sort of thing for better attacks. I don't know. It's
Hmm.
There's a lot of potential for really cool combos and stuff like that here. Next week's on break, obviously. Are you keen to do the top 50 stream next weekend?
Should be fun.
Sweet
I
as.
don't have 50 though. I have 30, and then a rough 17 after that.
Pick 3 people that you want. You can just do whatever. I need to go back over my list and that because it just
The bottom 20 are going to be so hard because like there's so many people you can miss that are just kind of like, oh yeah, that guy is pretty
honestly,
strong.
after this, do I drop Kid down?
Down, really? So he didn't perform as well as you thought? Oh, 'cause
No,
Rio, I guess.
he did, but he just hasn't shown Haki. And to me, like I got Luffy. Like spoiler here, Luffy to me is over the first commanders and is just sitting under the old man trio. And the
Uh-huh.
old man trio to me are currently gatekeeping the top tiers in this current era. Like,
That's how I totally understand. That's how I totally get it because I think if you can't scrap with the old man, they'll wreck you in like 2 hits. But if
mhm,
you can, you'll beat them because
they just don't have
like
that
they
endurance
don't have
anymore. Like
exactly. They just keepers.
to me, coming out of this fight, Luffy surpasses Rayleigh. Right now, he's just hugging underneath him. He's just like, "Come on, Rayleigh, fight me a little bit more seriously." And Rayleigh's just like, "All right, but I'm gonna hit you in the nuts if I need to win." You know, like
Yeah.
Rayleigh's not afraid to pull out all stops, and Luffy's just like, "That wasn't fair." Rayleigh's just like, "I'm not wanting fair. I want the win. I'm old."
Yeah.
Um, again, I don't know how long Act 3 is going to keep going through for before it completely finishes and wraps up. It's a little bit.
Mm.
It's in that sort of grey zone still, where it's like the fights are starting now. It could, we cut back, see some of the other Straw Hats and that, see Sanji make it up with Marco, and then fight Queen or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Honestly, I think we've been expecting Act 3 to end for so long that I've kind of lost
It's
just now.
it's the longest act by far. It sort of started um, in the 60s. Not even that. It was like 159 or 160. Sorry, 960. So it's been over 40 chapters now that this act's been going on. And
Yeah.
I could see it going for like a fair bit longer, like another 10, 15 chapters, or I could see it being like 4 chapters set up or 2 chapters set up, intermission really quick but really impactful. Like as we are saying in the last discussion we're having about the whole Shanks is going to make a move this year, and we've got whatever's going on with the Reverie and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, right.
It'll be interesting. I reckon what could be more interesting and could be really, really messed up is if Big Mum Pirates show up in the next couple chapters,
Yeah.
and the way the act ends is got Supernova up the top fighting the 2 Yonko, Straw Hats inside fighting the commanders. We're surrounded outside by the Big Mum commanders, and then if the Marines invade,
Right.
that would be pretty jacked. Like that, like in terms of like that's a rough fight. You know what I mean? Where it's like full layered warfare, where just like
Yeah, true.
it's not a we've got to win, and then we've got to go support the enemy so the other enemy doesn't beat us.
Yeah, fair. I see that happening. It's good. I'm pretty keen for the for 102 and etc. It seems like it's going to stay interesting, right? They're either going to keep doing fights, they're going to start new fights, or they're going to give us more Warlord content. So, like, regardless, every chapter seemingly is going to be pretty bloody good from here. So I'm pretty keen.
I feel like this act might end with them failing to defeat them, and Onigashima drops on the capital and kills a hell of a lot of people, and that's a tragedy. Like the people of Wano are sort of just jacked up.
Yeah, like yeah, That could be the case.
Like Luffy
Um,
always beats the big bad in front of the civilians, and that's where he's like, we're good. We saved the city, Patrick. We're all good. Whereas it would be the first time in the series where the civilians have seen him just lose or not even lose, just like fail in that sense. Like against Doflamingo, he ran out of time, but everyone was like, "You're gonna beat him. We know you're gonna beat him. We got money on you beating him." Fujitora is sitting there just like, "I got 5 grand on Luffy winning this fight." You know, so it'd be interesting.
yeah.
Um, Even more so, even this chapter, Kaido saying like, whoever wins this is like a step off from being Pirate King, and that's like so true. I've been saying for the longest, it's like we have so many poneglyphs to get through at the end of this arc, not just to
Yeah.
mention like the amount of allies and just stuff that you're gonna get from like this place here, and like
Yeah.
there,
Reputation.
there's
It's
no
gonna be.
excuse if Kaido and Big Mom go down here. There's no excuse for Law, Luffy, and Kid's crews to loot Seastone. So combatants on their crew should have access to that as sort of like you've unlocked this area. This is your resource from this area.
Yeah, that is true. I can
Because
see that. Yeah.
it's something we haven't really dealt with. Like I'm just gonna bring it up because it's just on my mind. When the hell is Hawkins gonna do something this arc? Like in this fight,
Mm.
he is.
I don't know. I don't think we're gonna see him just appear on the rooftop. I think it's gonna cut down, and we're gonna see the people on the lower levels who they're matching up against, and then we'll see some people like start to move again.
I could see some of the Straw Hats taking them out. Like you know how Apu's been one shot a few times now.
Yeah.
I could see a week into Pooh ends up having that fight that I was talking about with Brook. You know what I mean? And they have like a music off. Interesting fight there. Sanji taking on a commander. It is what it is. Maybe we see Beppo or one of Kid's crew fighting Hawkins or something like that. You know what I mean? Because I went back and looked, and
Thing is Brook versus Good Man is basically a DJ versus a classical musician,
Yeah.
right? It's like an old man versus like the new school.
Yeah.
And that'd be pretty interesting. He's like, "Oh, you young whippersnappers don't understand music." Yo.
it would honestly be so funny as well because Brook's just a master of all forms of music. If Brook just busts out some DJ moves, I reckon that'd be funny. That'd be funny. It'd be cringy, but it'd be funny.
It'd be good.
Yeah. So wrap it up in a sec, but yeah, like there's a few people like that are just unaccounted for in an odd way. Like we've seen Beppo with Law fighting in Onigashima, and now Law's here, and we've got no clue where Beppo is. Beppo should reasonably have Sulong as well as a combatant.
True.
So like, if you saw a Sulong Beppo go up against a Hawkins, right? It's not the most unrealistic thing in the world, and it would be a hard fight for Beppo regardless because of how Hawkins fights.
No. Where did Law send the scabbards? Probably to his crew, right? Maybe Law sent them to his crew, and then his crew defended. And then his crew is there, and then Beppo's going to see the two old minks, and they're going to be like, "Oh, Beppo, I remember you when you were a little kid." And then they go and fight.
Nah, I'm leaning more towards the scabbards got dropped down next to Momo and Yamato. Like,
Reckon?
yeah, I reckon because
them getting into a fight though.
because remember they're way up in the air at the moment, and Law's cruising the submarine down below under the water, right? I see Yamato having to defend all the injured people. Like, the top tier defendant. Because, okay, Yamato's defending. Say the island drops and the big mum pirates show up. Yamato versus Smoothie. In a drawn out fight over the injured.
Yeah.
That seems like a reasonable matchup to me. You know what I mean? Nothing too unreasonable one way or the other, and then that way they're still fighting. Or even if Yamato floods Jack, because obviously Luffy never saw Jack when they were running up, Jack's still unaccounted for. He's healing up. It'd be interesting if it was a battle of, we're both injured, or who's got whose faction who's healing is going to take out the other faction that's trying to heal.
Yeah.
Well, until next weekend, anything else you want to say before we end it?
I'm all good. I think we got through everything. It was a
Yeah.
bloody good chapter.
Yeah, no, it was a
Looking for the
damn
next
good
one.
chapter. I'm heaps keen for the next one. And next week we'll do our top 50 stream or top 30 stream featuring an extra 30 randoms or 20 randoms.